Here's a journalistic challenge. How does an American news operation get into North Korea, into the heart of Pyongyang, and get exclusive access to an enigmatic leader who is the central figure in a showdown with Washington over nuclear weapons? Easy. Just get a former basketball player who's covered in tattoos to go there with you. And before you know it, Dennis Rodman and Kim Jong-un will be clinking glasses, and your cameras will be there to cover the story. The news organization is Vice, and its exploits in Pyongyang got worldwide coverage. Vice has a different style of journalism. It travels the road less covered, and it turns up in some interesting places, but it's not for everybody. Critics say that in bringing news to a younger audience, Vice can be gimmicky, condescending, and self-indulgent. Vice doesn't care. The Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi now on a media outlet with a unique business model and an unconventional approach to journalism.
On February 28th, North Korea was making news. The story wasn't a nuclear bomb or a spat with its southern neighbor.
You would think the first American to meet North Korea's dictator Kim Jong-un would be Secretary of State John Kerry or even President Obama. But no, former basketball star Dennis Rodman beat them to the punch.
It was the kind of story that told you a few things you just didn't know. That Kim Jong-un is a serious fan of American basketball. That a long-retired 51-year-old ex-player can pull a crowd in Pyongyang. And that an upstart media outlet in New York,
Vice Magazine, New York production company,
Vice Magazine, is capable of making headline news around the world.
So we get asked this question a lot about Rodman in North Korea. And is it a stunt or is it news? What is it? And I think that if it's a stunt, then every TV company in the world should hire us to launch their TV shows. It was a way to get in. We figured it out. We got in. We met the most hermetic leader of the most hermetic country in the world. He did. And I always say, look, if Al Jazeera did that, if CNN did that, if 60 Minutes did that, would that even be a question? I don't think so.
There are different schools of thought on what their Dennis Rodman stunt was, and what's kind of surprising about it is that it's both. It was, it was both a sort of stunt that got them attention, and it also got them access to a country that regular news organizations have a hard time getting into.
A woman who we worked with as our intermediary in getting into North Korea took me aside and explained why we were able to get in and lots of other news organizations hadn't. And she basically explained it was because we had an idea. We weren't just saying, please let us in, please let us in. We basically came to them with doing this story about basketball diplomacy. And for some reason, the North Korean government responded to that. And that opened a lot of doors.
Vice's cameras captured images never seen before, that may never be seen again.
He's a great guy. He's just a great guy. We sit down and talk to him.
Setting aside Rodman's skills as a political analyst or a judge of character, it was a coup. A big deal for a 20-year-old outlet that started life as a small cultural magazine in Montreal. By 1999, the magazine had shifted base to New York, where it diversified.
Heavy metal rules.
Vice moved into video, launched its own record label, developed a YouTube audience of 1.5 million, and partnered briefly with CNN and MTV. The North Korea story was part of Vice's biggest media project yet, a partnership with premium American channel HBO. The new series promises to, quote, expose the absurdity of the modern condition, with an approach to journalism that's come to be known as viceness.
I don't know what this viceness is that everyone keeps talking about necessarily. I think for the longest time, I would choose the places I wanted to go to, and Shane would choose the places that were interesting to him and to me, and we would just go there with our guy and be like, let's find the story and get the story, and we come back and we make it, and everybody's like, ooh, it's so vicey or it's so that. I think a lot of it is just us going with our instincts and our gut and trying to tell interesting stories.
But it's an approach that can misfire. In 2009, Shane Smith hosted the Vice Guide to Liberia.
On our first day in Liberia, we see child junkies, malaria, AIDS, rape, and now we start hearing about cannibalism.
It was a hectic 8-part film that covered every type of weirdness the Vice team could find in the West African country.
It's a post-apocalyptic Armageddon with child soldiers smoking heroin, cross-dressing cannibals, systematic rape. It's total hell on earth.
The critics pounced. One writer dismissed the film as an unforgivable parachute hack job that perpetuates the Africa Heart of Darkness stereotype. If you went by the one-sided interview subjects selected for the piece, you're left thinking all Liberians are maimed or thugs, or hungry or abused or psycho or crazy. Rarely people.
We're in Uganda. Uganda's had a pretty good spell the last 25 years, no major civil wars, and they are the alcoholism capital of Africa.
There is a sense maybe that, here are a bunch of mostly white city kids parachuting into these dark corners of the world, impoverished places where there's miserable living conditions and unrest, and sort of saying, look, we're here, look how crazy this is. They sometimes get carried away with themselves a little bit.
Vice is delivering entertainment, and it's delivering it to people in their 20s and early 30s, young upper middle class white kids. It's like mainstream corporate publishing tactics and multimedia, but in this sort of veneer of being alternative and gritty with the sort of authenticity that CNN and the other major outlets can offer.
There's a certain arrogant swagger. Oh my God, look at us, we're going to all these crazy places. Are we the only ones who are going into Liberia or going into Karachi and interviewing Taliban fighters?
There may be something to that. In an age of shrinking newsrooms and disappearing budgets, Vice travels widely, covering offbeat stories. Its business model is different. Vice says it makes money through its record label and its ad agency, and it gets further funding from private investors. In 2011, it reported revenues of more than $100 million, much of that from sponsored content. Watch a couple of Vice videos. The more exotic the locale, the more likely there's a big-name sponsor funding the enterprise.
They don't observe as much of the traditional kind of wall between the advertising and editorial sides of organizations. They're profitable, and that's a very hard thing to achieve in this media landscape. But it's not necessarily a model that mainstream or established media organizations can easily pursue.
Maybe not. However, like CNN before and HBO now, they can work with Vice. Under the right circumstances, even the most disparate cultures have a few things in common. The proof of that can be found in the pictures from Pyongyang.